In today's video, we're going to cover the differences between the Diablo blades and the FREUD blades using the 10-inch blades with the 5/8-inch arbor. This does not cover any other blades. We will touch on the industrial line from FREUD as well for a little bit, but I don't currently own any of those. The first thing to get out of the way is that both of these are made by the same company. They're both made by FREUD Industrial, and they are simply different lines from the same company. They have three in total: the Diablo, the FREUD, and then the FREUD Industrial. And they are all made in the same place from the same basic materials. The differences are relatively minor, but also important depending upon who you are and what you want to use them for. The first major difference is the price. This glue line rip blade, for example, and these are both full kerf, is $76. Now, this is a bit of a specialty blade, but essentially consider it a type of rip blade, and it is $76. This 50-tooth combination is $71. The Diablo version of the 50-tooth is only $37. The 40-tooth Diablos, I could only find on Amazon a 2-pack for $66. So let's say $33, $35, something like that. And then the 60-tooth Diablo is $49 currently. So a significant difference in price. And basically, the more teeth, the higher it gets because the more carbide. So the first thing you need to consider when it comes to price and what's right for you is, do you have a way to get table saw blades sharpened and sharpened by someone who knows what they're doing? If you do not, then in many cases, the FREUD blade is not going to serve a great purpose for you. Now, there are some reasons you may want to go with FREUD, even if you can't get them sharpened, but the key difference here is the size of the carbide. Even on their thin kerf versions, it's meant to be resharpened. We'll show a little closer, but the difference in these teeth size is significant. If you do not have a way to get a blade resharpened, there is a very good chance, other than a few specialty blades they sell, that this is simply not worth the cost to you. Now, to get a better look at the carbide size differences, this is the FREUD blade on the right and the Diablo on the left. And the teeth are all the same thickness, size for all of the blades in the line. You can see you've got almost twice as much carbide on this blade. And yes, this is a full kerf, but that's only the thickness. That is not the size of the tooth in general. So you are paying, in many ways, for a lot of extra carbide to get it sharpened. The next thing we're going to look at is the availability of kerf sizes. These are both full kerf blades, which means they're about 1/8 of an inch. The Diablo and the thin kerf version of FREUD's are slightly different by like 7/100ths. The Diablos are 0.098 and FREUD lists their thin kerf as 0.091. So a very fractional difference, but the Diablo is slightly thicker. Now, the importance here is that the size of the kerf is going to really hurt you or help you depending upon the motor size of your table saw. Smaller table saws are you're just going to put unnecessary stress on the motor by running a thicker kerf blade. It's got to remove more wood as it goes through. If you are trying to preserve wood, as in you've got something very special and you can't afford to waste much of it, there's no real reason to go with a thick kerf over a Diablo or thin kerf of the same type blade. You'll waste less of it in the kerf with a Diablo or a FREUD thin kerf. The next main difference is that each of these lines has different offerings. Some of the blades available in the FREUD line are not available in the Diablo line. For example, this 30-tooth glue line rip, which has a triple chip grind. This is meant to get you glue line ready rips. It is not a normal ripping blade. It's not meant to cut super thick things. And it has a very special purpose that you cannot get with Diablo. FREUD has a few blades like this which are simply not available with Diablo, including a normal rip blade with a flat top grind, which is really good for things like splines, dados. It will leave a perfectly flat bottom. The Diablo rip blade is an alternating tooth bevel, which means at the top, the teeth alternate out to the side and it will not leave a clean bottom. So if you're looking for a flat top grind blade, you will have to get a FREUD rip blade. Okay, so what are some of the other differences? Well, for example, each of these blades has these kind of heat-reducing, friction-reducing we'll call them squiggle laser lines. These are not all the way through the blade. These simply are cut with a laser and indented in the blade. These go all the way through the blade. How much that matters, I don't know, but it's a difference I have noticed in the two blades. You can see that the layout on each of the blades is very different as well, with both of the FREUD blades coming in a target-like towards the center method pattern, and these are all around the outside. Now these do have full cut-throughs here. The FREUD does as well. They're slightly thicker. The next thing I've noticed that I don't think is supposed to be different, but I really noticed that the tolerances on the arbor openings are much tighter with the FREUD blades. And we're not talking about a problem with performance or anything, but when you go to put a FREUD blade on the table saw, it's much tighter getting on there than many of the Diablos are. Now that may be a slight quality control thing. They're obviously both meant for 5/8 of an inch arbors, but when you get one of these, you'll notice that it's much tighter to get on. You have to almost keep the blade perfectly up and slide it. These can kind of wiggle a little bit. Again, no noticeable difference in cutting. The arbor nut tightens it as well, but just something I've noticed that's different. I also would just like to note that the FREUD does have an industrial line, which is silver. And as far as I know from the company themselves, this red Astra coating is really the only difference. It's a little bit cheaper. They just do not have this anti-friction coating on them. The Diablo and FREUD both do. The FREUD Industrial, which are essentially identical blades without the Astra coating, are slightly cheaper and can be found in the same line as these, all the same types. So let's talk about what blade is right for you and whether you want to spend the significant amount more for a FREUD blade. The first thing above all else is the sharpening. Do you plan or have an available way to get these sharpened? FREUD offers a sharpening service, but to get free shipping, you have to send in something like 5 at once. They charge by the tooth, so it gets significantly more expensive to resharpen the higher the tooth count. It is still cheaper than buying a brand new blade to go through them, but it gets pretty close on certain blades depending upon the shipping. If you put 5 of them together, they will do free shipping and they will essentially pay for the shipping label for you to send them in. But most people aren't going to have 5 FREUD blades that are watching this. That'd be like, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of dollars in blades. If you have a trusted local sharpener and you can save money, these are probably a really good option for you, either the full kerf or the thin kerf, because the cost to sharpen most of these locally will be less than a brand new version of the same type of a Diablo. It may be close, but it's probably a little less. If you're looking for a place to sharpen or a way to possibly pay a little less, consider asking your lumber yard or any local cabinet dealer or cabinet makers, as they often ship out blades in bunches and you can pay them a small fee to put yours in there as well. And of course you pay for the sharpening too. My lumber yard, he ships out blades every week, so I can pay a little fee to him to add my blade to the pile and save money instead of paying for the shipping to send off to FREUD themselves. I don't think there's really a big difference in longevity in terms of the time that this lasts versus the time that this lasts before you have to get it resharpened. I've noticed no difference. This one is basically brand new, but I have the other blade that came in the same 2-pack, and this one was from 5/30/23, and so this lasted about a year. Now, I will note that I use different blades for different things, so I'm not putting all of the wear and tear on one blade. This 60-tooth crosscut is only for final crosscuts and miters, and this is probably 3.5 years old. This 50-tooth combo from 2022, and this one 2022 as well. But for me, the 40-tooth Diablo is my main workhorse. I leave it on there for most things. If I'm doing specialty rips, I use these. I don't currently have a special ripping blade. I just replaced it with the 40-tooth, so I didn't have to change it as much. But I do in the future want to try a FREUD-specific ripping blade with 30 teeth and just see how it goes. The next reason you may choose FREUD over Diablo is if you're looking for a very specific type of blade. This glue line rip, for example, comes in both full and thin kerf, and the flat top grind ripping blade to allow you to do very clean splines is not sold in Diablo and is only sold in FREUD. So depending upon the specificity of blade type, you may be left with only going with FREUD or another brand entirely. CMT sells prices kind of closer to Diablo, but a little bit in the middle, and they have a line that kind of mixes both of these together. They have a flat top grind blade. So if you're looking for something closer to the price of a Diablo, but want a specific blade, check CMT blades as well, because they may have it. The next reason you may choose Diablo is simply the table saw you have. If you're using a job site saw, you're probably going to want to go with a Diablo or a thin kerf FREUD. You can push through with the full kerf, but there's just no reason to put that strain on the motor. Yes, these are a little more stabilized in that you may get a little bit of flexing and a little bit of vibration with these, but like I said, I use the 40-tooth Diablo as my main workhorse, and I have no issue with it. They do sell blade stabilizers out there for thin kerf. Again, I don't know anyone who uses those. You can try them if you want. But if you have a job site saw, you're probably going to want to stick with either the Diablos or the FREUD thin kerf. The final reason to go with Diablo is just availability. Home centers sell Diablo. My Home Depot down the street is where I got both of these. These have to be ordered online. That may add extra cost for you if you have to buy the blade from somewhere that requires shipping. Maybe not. Maybe you have Amazon Prime. So the ability to go pick up all kinds of different Diablo blades at a home center is a nice benefit. If I needed an 80-tooth fine finish blade, I could go down tomorrow morning and grab one. I would have to wait a few days to get one from FREUD, but that's not really any difference in the blades themselves. And those are the significant differences, or minor in some cases, between the Diablo line and the FREUD line of FREUD blades, both made by the same company. They serve different purposes, but all can do a very good job, and they're really good blades. If you have a new table saw, don't feel the need to go buy one of these right away. If you're just getting into woodworking, Diablo's all the way. Great blade, great price. There are other blade options in roughly the same market price, but these are tried and true. These have been used by tens, hundreds of thousands of woodworkers, and I will continue to use Diablo blades as FREUD blade. And if you're in the market for the FREUD blade, just know that the other line, the silver line, is simply without the coating, as far as I can tell from a FREUD rep. That's going to be all. If you have any other differences or similarities that I noticed, please leave them down in the comments. And I hope this helped you understand better between FREUD blades and Diablo blades.